The stars above Amaris Station glimmered like cold fire, silent witnesses to the unraveling of 2 millennia of peace. Somewhere beyond them, the ancient codes of diplomacy burned to ash in the void. No one expected it. Not like this, not when humanity had finally proven itself more than just a defiant species on a lonely blue planet. Not after everything they'd sacrificed. And certainly not at the hands of the Galactic King, the living emblem of unity who stood calm, composed, dressed in ceremonial scarlet. Even as the blood of the human general soaked into the station floor, the transmission was brief. Less than 10 seconds. No sound, only video. The clip, captured by security drones, flickered across every corner of civilized space before the feed was abruptly cut. A sweeping hall with glass walls, an audience of 12 species gathered for the treaty renewal. The human general standing straight in her gleaming uniform, a symbol of Earth's rise among the stars. And then, without warning, the blaze of light from the king's palm. A direct energy strike. Center mass. Her body crumpling, eyes wide in disbelief as the floor caught her fall. The room erupted in chaos. And then, no explanation. No press conference. No claim of malfunction, no apology. Just silence. The kind of silence that comes right before stars go dark or wars begin. People remembered the general by one name, her title. Commander-in-Chief of Earth's coalition forces. Born in the dust lands after the storm collapse, risen through the ranks because she never backed down. She'd stared down death before. The Derek swarm at Idran 4, the mutiny at Red Halo Base, the crisis at the Arkan Drift. Not once had she flinched. Not once had she let Earth be dismissed as lesser in the Galactic Assembly. The Galactic Council had come to respect her not just because of Earth's military strength, but because of her voice-firm, relentless, controlled. She was, to most humans, more than a symbol. She was proof that the human first yield HFA had worked. The HFY doctrine wasn't about arrogance. It wasn't about conquest. It was survival with dignity. Those early centuries after first contact had taught Earth hard lessons. Every planet with a flag stronger than Earth's wanted to either dominate, manipulate, or ignore it. But humans endured. They brokered deals others thought impossible, built technologies once believed too advanced for their development here, and eventually earned a place at the table not as servants, but allies. When the Galactic Peace Treaty was signed 2,000 years ago, it included Earth not because the other species valued humans, but because they couldn't afford to ignore them anymore, and now Earth's signatory was dead, executed, on record. In cold blood, someone once said civilizations don't collapse overnight, they rot quietly, until one moment breaks the silence and everything falls. This was that moment, as news of the assassination rippled across systems. Outrage bloomed like wildfire in every human. Colony from Luna's shadowed craters to the diamond fields of Koros Prime. Governments panicked. Fleets mobilized. Protests surged. Some called it a declaration of war. Others whispered that it couldn't be real. The Galactic King, the most powerful political figure in known space, was a measured, ancient being, one who had lived too long, seen too much. The very idea that he would break the treaty, stand up in a public council, and murder a peace envoy, it didn't make sense, but the footage was real. The council confirmed it, and by 3 cycles after the incident, hundreds of systems had already withdrawn from the council in protest or fear. Back on Earth, memorials appeared in every city. Screens played old footage of the general's speeches, her first address to the Galactic Assembly, her declaration condemning species-based colonialism, her initiation of the Peace Renewal Charter. People wept. Others demanded revenge. But none knew what truly happened inside that council chamber before the shot was fired. And that's where the real story begins, not in the killing itself, But in the silence that followed, on the station's outer perimeter, deep inside an old relay tower left over from the first expansion era, a technician was trying not to get involved. He wasn't military, wasn't diplomatic, just someone who knew his way around wires, signal loops, and encrypted hardlines. His job was quiet, routine, but 3 hours before the general was killed, he picked up a signal. Not a message, something deeper. Something hidden in the pulse line between security drones and the mainframe. A backdoor protocol, old and buried, layered in code the council used to seal historical records. He didn't understand it, not fully. But the signal had a signature, a line tagged in human glyphs. Something ancient, something forbidden. It read Project Sovereign. He tried to report it. No response. The senior officers on station weren't replying. And then the networks went dark. Across the galaxy, others were putting pieces together. A linguist on Maris Outpost found a phrase buried in a Tarthian transmission mere seconds before it was scrubbed from the database. Asterisk, asterisk, endgame initiated. Asterisk, asterisk, a retired pilot on Proxima Edge saw a ghost ship blink into orbit. One marked with pre-Federation war sigils long believed to be decommissioned. And on a hidden archive moon, known only by its fire-red rings, a group of cold case analysts was already reviewing forgotten data from the first Treatia, claws hidden in microscopic embossing, detectable only with old Terran light spectrums. It mentioned one rule, asterisk, asterisk, should a treaty delegate be killed by an initiating founder, the contributing species may withdraw binding limits immediately. Asterisk, asterisk, in other words. Earth was no longer bound by the peace code. What no one knew was that the general had discovered something days before the pact renewal. Someone inside the Galactic Council had warned her not to sign the peace extension. Not because peace was wrong, but because the treaty was a lie. That it had been used for 2,000 years to suppress one race more than any other. Not with weapons, with structure, limitations, laws written by species that feared what humanity could become, unchecked. And maybe, just maybe, she had decided not to go quietly back in the council chambers. Her blood had barely cooled before the Galactic King turned and walked away, his guards falling in step behind him. No explanation, no remorse, but as he passed the glass wall, he paused. There was a reflection there, not of himself, but of the general standing once more, eyes shining not with fear, but with knowing. That's where the footage cut, and that's where we began. Because somewhere out there, Earth is waking up in a way the galaxy has never seen. Not as victims, not as rebels, but as something else entirely. And if peace was built to keep them small, then it just broke. Long before the general stood in that pearl-white chamber and took the shot heard across all of known space, Earth had changed, quietly, strategically. While other species flaunted their empires in brute strength, humans had been building something else, layers of influence. Networks of hidden alliances, technology masked beneath treaties, weapons disguised as peacekeeping tools. They played the game, but behind the scenes, they prepared for the moment the game would turn against them. Because history had taught them it always did. Back in Sol System, Earth's skies were clear that day. At least where the cameras could see. News anchors delivered half-truths in worried tones, and diplomats posed in front of ruined flags, trying to say the right things. But in the underground corridors of Kiro's command complex, beyond the reach of civilian media, those with real authority moved quickly and without ceremony. One of them was known simply as the Executor. His file was off-limits, his name redacted from every registry. To the public, he didn't exist. But in rooms where plans were made in whispers, he had shaped Earth's defense doctrine for nearly 2 decades. And on this day, the day humanity lost its primarch, he stood in front of a black console, watching footage from Amaranth Station on a machine that still ran on Earth native code, no alien interference, no translation filters. Just raw data, unfiltered dot. He watched the general fall 3 times in silence. Then he paused it, zoomed in on the king's hands. They didn't shake. Not even a flicker. It wasn't an accident. It wasn't rage. The Galactic King had executed her as if checking an item off a list. Like he'd waited a long time to do it. "We need to move Project Warden into Phase 3, he said without turning. Behind him, a younger analyst looked up from a table of holograms, wide-eyed. "But sir, Warden's not ready." Executor didn't blink. "Neither is war. But it's already here." For centuries, Earth's survival had leaned on tight diplomacy. Play just clever enough to avoid suspicion, just strong enough to avoid invasion. But Warden was different. It was built during the early rise of HFY Human First Yield, a doctrine born not from superiority, but sheer necessity. When the first Council protocols forced Earth to limit energy output, tech exports, even childbearing quotas on outer colonies, it became clear they were being managed. Slowly, quietly, the galaxy had set rules not to include humanity, but to contain it. Warden was Earth's answer. A decentralized network of fail-safes, automated defense AIs, clone contingency forces, hidden archives that couldn't be deleted, and codebooks that had been handed down through generations of operatives, each memorizing them for a moment that might never come. Until now, what most didn't know was the general had been one of the original architects of Warden. She'd taken a vow years before her role as Earth's face in the galactic arena became public. A vow to protect Earth even from its allies. Especially from them. Back aboard Amaranth Station, the aftermath was being cleaned up. The Council had entered a rarely invoked emergency session, species code 95 Theta. No press allowed. No recordings. Only native speakers in each room, so no automatics could eavesdrop inside that chamber, where blood still stained the white floor despite Council efforts to clean and sanitize the scene. 12 other delegates sat, most in shock. Some in denial. Delegate Cranial, the salt-boned emissary from Telluri Prime, leaned close to his translator, whispering hard. Why would he do this? There was no threat. No conflict. This wasn't protocol. Across the table, the Shernan representative's spine cilia twitched in irritation. Was there signal tampering? No, another voice answered. We ran checks. No ambient influence. No mental probe traces. The action was voluntary. He just stood there and ended her. Someone else murmured. Not one of them said the obvious out loud. If the Galactic King broke the treaty, if the founder species nullified the pact. Then humanity was free to retaliate. The chain that held Earth in place, by law, by threat, by fine print, was broken. And that reality frightened them more than the King's action itself. They didn't fear Earth's army. They feared what humans were capable of once the leash came off. That was the true meaning buried deep within the HFY. Rumors that old members of the Council liked to mock. It wasn't just pride. It was prophecy. The belief that, when pressed to the wall, humans didn't collapse, they evolved. HFY had always been misunderstood. It didn't mean humanity above all. It meant humanity will endure, no matter what you try. And now they had been tested. Aboard a patrol carrier orbiting Saturn's gas line, Sergeant Reyna walked into the command bunker with hollow eyes. Her crew had just finished decoding the failed transmission from the General sent milliseconds before the beam. Strike cut her off. Rena played the message only once. Everyone in the room froze. If this reaches you, the General's voice rasped, glancing slightly off screen, don't seek truth in the halls of power. Find it in the classified treaties, pre-1 era, Look at Addendum C. We were never equals. This whole time, it was meant to keep us small. But now, we choose how big we grow. Initiate Warden Phase 3. Earth stands alone if it must. There was a beat of silence, then a flicker right before the shot. She knew. Somehow, she'd known what was coming. The implications thickened the air. A deliberate message, sent with her final breath. Not to prevent war, but to prepare for it. Elsewhere, in the shadow ring of Yella's reach, a lone data cartographer named Elin had stumbled onto Earth's side of the treaty once thought to be lost. It was archived in a vault that hadn't been touched for 600 years. Something was wrong with it. The first 11 pages were the known terms, the ones commonly circulated in council records. But past that, buried in microtext, barely detectable without ancient Terran optics, was a clause that had never been made public. Written not by council officials, but human strategists. It wasn't a demand. It wasn't even a statement. It was a promise. Should Earth be targeted unjustly by any founding species, we will not plead for survival. We will not ask for permission. We remember our history when we were alone the first time. We adapted. If we are alone again, we will ascend. They hadn't written terms of peace. They'd written a warning disguised as diplomacy. Back in Kira's command, the executor stared at a flickering map of galactic trade lanes. Red lines stretched across sectors' routes, shutting down. Airspace frozen. Fleet logs encrypted. Any word from the Arc ships? He asked, status green on one. 2 others have gone dark? He nodded grimly. The Arc ships were Earth's fallback colonies, self-sustaining megaships housing over 100,000 lives each, moving through deep space at the edge of known borders. Built to survive extinction-level war? If even one survived, humanity could outlast anything. Then the call came, a tight band transmission, speaking in clearance-layered code. Phoenix Act confirmed. Hostile Act acknowledged. Earth transition to independent enforcement under HFY. Someone in the room gasped. It was official. Earth was now operating under war protocol. Fully unshackled, Executor turned to his aides. Activate Sentinels. Pull the sleep fleets. Initiate Phase 4 shelter drills on Luna, Mars, and Chorus. No council rep gets through orbit unscanned. We're on our own now. Do we retaliate? Asked his second-in-command, eyes hard with resolve. He stared at the projection of the council chamber one last time, the frozen image of the general, split milliseconds before her fall. Not fear in her expression, strategy. No, he said. Not yet. We wait. For what? He stared out the window. The stars shimmered like forgotten secrets, for the king to explain why he just ended peace. But deep down, he already had a theory. One he hadn't voiced yet, not even in classified briefings. His gut told him this wasn't a slip of madness or an act of war. It was a message. The king wasn't trying to start a conflict. He was trying to prevent something worse. Something old. Something buried. And Earth, as always, was caught in the middle. Now it was time to find out why. Across the Sela drift, past the fractured moon belts and forgotten mining rings, the Uriah outpost had gone dark less than 60 hours after the assassination. Technically, it was a weather relay station. That's what the log said. But those who really understood Earth's true position in the Galactic Balancing Act knew Uriah had nothing to do with storms. Inside its steel bones, under 3 kilometers of sub-ice crust, Uriah held something older than the peace treaty, an active code chamber still relying on human-only authorization layers. The kind that triggered during planetary lockdown or mass-scale breaches in diplomatic cover. When the general died, Uriah received the alert before most government bodies even registered her life signs dropping. But then, just hours later, it stopped responding, and that terrified the people who knew what Uriah was really guarding. Back on Earth, Executor stood in a silo bunker beneath Iceland's old tectonic shelf, where seismic frequency blocked off-world scans. A man in a tattered raincoat across from him looked out of place among the polished consoles. No insignia. No ID tag. Just sharp eyes and the patience of someone used to waiting decades between urgent assignments. They've buried it. All of it, the raincoat man said. Everything before the first charter. Every incident, every flagged warning, scrub it from both council and public systems. But they missed one fragment, barely a minute long. He tapped on an old drive, the kind built before quantum ports were common. Executor said nothing. He took the unit, plugged it into the offline console, and watched. The image was degraded, probably a composite pulled from degraded FTL comms, a grainy image of a much younger. General blinked onto the screen. She was off-duty, leaning in front of what looked like a desert tent. Someone behind her handled the feed, likely holding the old cam pad sideways. Her voice was softer, less commanding, but clear. If anyone's watching this, it means the story's repeating itself, she said. They think the first contact war ended, but it didn't. It changed uniforms. Behind her, in the audio static, a different voice crackled terse, panicked. Not hers. You're going to get us flagged. They already flagged us, she replied. This isn't about surviving another incursion. It's about stopping what's buried under the disguise of peace. The council didn't just form to avoid war. They formed to prevent ascendancy. Our ascendancy. The recording glitched out after that. Executor stared at the blank screen longer than necessary, then looked toward the raincoat man, whose real name was only known to 3 people alive. They called him Walker, and for 50 years his job wasn't killing enemies or leaking threats. It was collecting forgotten truths and keeping them buried long enough not to get anyone killed. Until now, Uriah Station went silent, Executor said. Walker exhaled slowly. So the gate's waking up? Executor didn't respond to that directly. He just powered down the console and moved on above the ruined Heartland trade routes. In what once was a neutral cargo zone, a group of human civilian liners had begun forming up into convoys. Not military, not armed. At least not openly. The fear was real now. Families fleeing colonies that might be caught in a war spiral. Politics didn't matter anymore. Legacy didn't protect you when drone fleets started scanning your ports, mid-transit and cutting fuel rights among the passengers. A young translator named Alex sat stiff in her seat, fingers curled around a transmitter that hadn't worked since the Emerith blackout. Just days ago, she had been working on translating economic protocols between humans and the Qatari. Trade laws, a project she had been overly proud of. Now it felt meaningless. Her seat window showed 3 frigates forming up around the convoy, each bearing markings that had once indicated peacekeeping vessels sanctioned by the council. Now, those symbols meant nothing. Fear in the air wasn't the kind that made people scream. It was the quieter, deeper kind. The kind that made you watch every blinking light on the wall and wonder if it was a warning about to go off. Alex wasn't military. She wasn't part of any black project or elite counterforce. But she remembered something her aunt, a retired diplomat, once told her, something strange that she had never spoken of again. That the Galactic King wasn't just a figurehead. That long ago, when the species were still learning how to coexist, the king had authorized a covert cleansing of a proto-ascendant species, a civilization that had evolved too fast, learned too much, and refused to slow down when instructed. No one ever said the name of that species, but her aunt would pause, look away, and then mutter, "Thank the stars it wasn't us." Alex had thought it meant the humans had avoided judgment. Now she wasn't sure. On the edge of Chorus Prime, inside a decommissioned mining dome, 6 operatives sat in a dim-lit chamber watching the same 10 seconds of footage over and over. The general falling, the king's hand lifting, the almost invisible shimmer just before the shot, the body slumping forward. But they weren't looking at the general. They were analyzing what was behind her reflection. Of them pointed at the image paused right as her body collapsed. There, right there. The others leaned in, a faint shape in the glass wall, angular, not part of the council room. Set up, timestamp it, said the lead tech. She ran a filter, inverted the reflection algorithm, and stabilized the resolution. What came into focus sent an instant chill through the room. It was a drone. Not one of Earth's, not council tech either. Something older. Smaller, masked in cross-spectrum light. It shouldn't have been there. It had been observing everything. Positioned perfectly to record the palace strike from an unusual angle. No security. Protocol accounted for unregistered recon unit, the tech confirmed. Design suggests pre-ascendancy build, possibly bleeding over from old layer tracks. Meaning it's not from any of the modern systems. Somebody seated that thing in the council chamber decades ago, waiting for this moment. Someone had expected this to happen, maybe even engineered it, while Earth's fleets quietly shifted formation across stellar checkpoints, while suspended ambassadors tried to reopen comms through fragmentary frequency gates. Someone else was moving faster, smarter, through silence. Through memory. Deep in Jupiter's Forge array, a dormant AI lit up for the first time in 19 years. It accessed its protocols, found the matching sequence, Phoenix Code Echo live. It began compiling data, not to send, but to deliver to someone designated only as Origin Returner Species 01 Hydra. The AI didn't know what Hydra stood for, but inside an encrypted vault nearby, sealed under multi-lock failsafes, one of the general's final authored protocols became active. It contained 4 things. Backup of council communications intercepted through quote-level access, a genetic pairing map of species observed, modifying baseline evolutionary tracks, a set of command overrides, tied to orbital control platforms in Sol Iraden, and Mythosectors. And one final directive. Unsigned asterisk. The treaty was written to suppress fire, not share it. If the king has acted, then he fears what we've begun to remember. Run Shadow Loop 7. Don't retaliate. Don't delay. Prepare to ascend. Asterisk. The story was no longer about revenge. It wasn't just about Earth defending itself. The deeper question was rising like radio, static through every layer of the crisis. What had the Galactic King seen in humanity that terrified him enough to break the peace himself? What truth was buried so deep within Earth's bloodline, its history, its staggering climb across shadows of extinction after extinction, that the only way to stop it was to kill its living banner? And more importantly, was it too late? Somewhere far beyond council space, on a blackened moon long cracked by failed proto-terraforming, a figure moved through the dust unarmored, unnamed, carrying nothing except a dust-strewn device with glyphs older than first contact itself. They stopped at the edge of a crater, knelt, and opened the ancient transmitter file. All it said was, asterisk, asterisk, it has begun. Asterisk, asterisk, and the figure smiled, just barely, as stars above flickered in unnatural formation. The cold winds drummed over the Martian descent ranges as the first unauthorized landing craft broke through the edge of the no-fly zone. It came cloaked, slow, silent, no transponder, no beacon, no call sign. But its flight path was deliberate, precise. It descended between sensors, curved low beneath early warning satellites, and touched down less than 5 kilometers from Helix Command, a shadow facility buried deep under the southern ridge, known only to a tiny handful of people across EarthGov's inner circle, Encrypted comms immediately flared across the underground network like tiny sparks. Protocol 01 was already in effect. Too late to hide. Too early to strike, a small team moved toward the ridge perimeter, weapons ready. Not because they expected an attack, but because everything had changed since the assassination. No contact could be trusted. No ship allowed near Earth's core systems without being challenged, especially one known in the classified logs as having vanished 13 years ago. During an operation in the Vadress Maelstrom, the first operative to see it recognized the ship's shape instantly. Long, narrow, a Terran stealth courier marked HY01, not Council Tech, not foreign built. This was old Earth Black Ops hardware, and it shouldn't have been flying. The pilot had been declared lost in service. Name scrubbed. Operation redacted. Search logs sealed by the general herself, but now the door to that same ship slowly hissed open and a lone figure stepped out. Not in uniform, not armed. Covered in dust, beard overgrown, movement stiff and cautious. He lifted his hands and said one sentence the guards on duty repeated for weeks afterward. Unable to forget it, I know why the king pulled the trigger. The transmission from Mars arrived silently on Executor's secure band within minutes. He didn't respond right away. Instead, he stood in silence in the war chamber at the edge of orbit, the old war satellite Solmir 1, still functioning in reduced stealth mode despite the collapse of the space. Treaties. On the display in front of him was a pulse map of human fleet movements. Circles lit across 3 sectors. Olympus Gate was holding for now, but Earth's defense wall was stretched thin across the arc line. Several Council watch stations had gone offline, burned out from cyberghost interference, or abandoned outright. One of them, Zoria 9, had tried to push its last active signal across the deep relay system before the crash. From the garbled message, one word repeated over and over, distorted and eerie, asterisk returning, asterisk, another flare came through moments later. This one from the Black Ark, over chimeral space. They'd launched 9 Earth ships. No flag, no announcement. Just jumped clean out of nowhere over the council grid. These ships were off-book. Quiet fleets. Registered only in sealed HFY archives. Built for speed and aggression under deep preparation war protocols. And they were moving with purpose straight toward the Amaranth systems, the same region that had hosted the summit where the general had died. The standoff had begun, but no one was claiming responsibility. Not military, not EarthGov, not even the underground Terran defense leagues. The Executor's people tried to call them back. No. Answer. These weren't ships waiting for orders, they were responding. To one, the man from the courier sat in the dark of the Helix debriefing chamber, eyes locked on the interface pad. He hadn't spoken again since his strange arrival. Not until the Executor himself granted temporary access to EarthGov's shared threat archive. Then he rose from his seat and pulled something from a cracked case strapped to his side, a shard of alloy embedded with living memory code. He placed it gently on the table. This was inside the king's old envoy vault, he said, before it was purged, before Earth was allowed full delegate status. The shard pulsed once, then flickered, illuminating old-style galactic script, asterisk, specimen 01, human ascendant class projected, breach date, unknown monitor recommended, asterisk. The words looked like they belonged in a xenobiology file. But there were no planetary tags, no study records, no council verification. They lied about what first contact really was, the man said. It wasn't diplomatic. It was diagnostic. Behind the walls, somewhere deep in Earth's memory systems, red alert lights sensed across risk monitoring charts. Global panic was close now. There would be no hiding it for much longer. Everyone was talking, every colony, every station, every freelancer trying to jump borders before another fleet launched. Every family wondering if the skies over their cities would stay quiet tonight. In orbit. The Ghost Fleet carried 0 diplomats. There were no talks scheduled. Not since the Council had locked Earth out of the emergency loop. When the general had been killed, Earth hadn't answered with words. They'd gone silent, and silence for humanity was never peace. It was countdown. 20-7 hours later. At the edge of the outer system, something strange happened. The king, who hadn't sent a word across any channel since the assassination, broadcast directly into the old pre-treaty analog range. Not encrypted. Just raw sound. It didn't go through council lines. It didn't go through diplomacy codes. It went straight to the only species who's still used deep wave tactile receivers by instinct. Humans. His voice came through the static like something carried on the backs of storms. I didn't kill her to start war, he said. I killed her to delay a rebirth. There was only silence after that. Ben. The oldest emergency code in Earth's history went live from the Mars undernet. Asterisk. Ascendancy gate confirmed inbound. Asterisk. The message didn't say what the ascendancy gate was, but those who knew, those kept far out of the public roles under quiet authority, had always understood. There had always been rumors of a second biological layer hidden in Earth's development path, something inactive, something sealed, seeded maybe, discovered in genomics research and buried under threat of extinction order. The general had known. She'd found the final sealed records buried in the first treaty's unscanned section V. And she'd begun waking it up. Earth hadn't just been climbing the ranks. They'd been unlocking a part of themselves someone else had tried to erase. HFY documents had always emphasized human adaptation, resilience, survival, but none of those had explained why it was so unusual. Why humans could adapt to gravity shifts, emotional patterning, rapid weapon evolution, multi-environmental colonization, at a pace that frightened even dominant species, because it wasn't just evolution. It might have been design. The general had found out. Executor turned to Walker in the northern terminal bunker and said only one thing. Where's the gate landing? Walker responded without hesitation. Sector 12. Europa subcrater range, beneath the ice. What's the countdown? 43 hours until arrival. The executor closed his eyes, heart beating somewhere between clarity and dread. Everything was in motion now. Black fleets, old ghosts, rogue couriers returning from exile, fragments of code written before Earth even had a unified government, and above it all, the one question burning louder than all the noise. What did the king see in humanity's future? What had frightened him enough to end 2,000 years of carefully preserved peace with a single act so irreversible, so calculated? It felt more like a stall than a strike. And what, in the general's final encrypted code, was too dangerous to let finish running? In a low-orbit capsule just beneath the storm lines of Jupiter, the general's last avatar holographically, stored in a failsafe at I Matrix unlocked its final stage and began running protocols marked non-reversible. Her face flickered into form, not to speak words of vengeance, but to light a beacon. A signal too deep for Council Tech 2. Track. 1 that wasn't calling for war. It was calling for the others, the ones scattered. The ones born under silence, the ones who remembered. The last 4 words embedded in the signal pulsed brightly, broadcasting on every ancient Terran sub-binary channel. Asterisk. Ready, return, rise, remember. Asterisk, and across every system, Across every hiding place, through every bloodline where old echoes still slept in the bones of humanity, they began to wake. For 2 nights and 2 days, the sky above Earth's major cities remained silent. No new broadcasts came from the council chambers. No fleet movements crossed the peace corridor. The stars just hung overhead, distant and quiet, like watchers holding their breath. And somewhere beneath the frozen crust of Europa, the Ascendancy Gate finally opened, not with violence or fire, but with light. A pillar rising slowly upward, silent and graceful, casting its reflection across the ice fields while observers on every human colony watched the alert signal's blink white dot. It was unlike anything modern guidance systems had recorded. Not a weapon, not a ship, not a biological threat, but something else, not a structure, circular, organic, and impossibly old, buried long before Earth's first digital transmissions, before the moon was colonized, before the first contact. And whatever it carried did not belong to anyone living today. Back on the surface, Executor stood at the Europa command station, eyes locked to the windows as ice began to crack around the gate's base. He wasn't breathing. No one inside the station was. Around him were military leaders, scientists, and some of the general's closest allies, people who had been moved offline once the alarm went out, pulled from posts, told to wait because what was coming couldn't be handled with drones or missiles. Walker stood next to him, holding a small drive that still buzzed faintly with unread protocols from the general's private code chain. He wasn't dressed like a soldier. He never was. But there was something about the way he hadn't taken his eyes off the horizon that said, what many in the room didn't, he'd seen something like this before. If you have any answers, Executor said to him. Low and firm, this is the time. Walker exhaled. Quiet, it's not a weapon. It's a second gate. Second gate to what? To us, Walker whispered, his voice low. The room looked at him in silence. So he told them what the general had found. Not in one sitting. Not through ranked speeches or polished summaries. Just in solid sentences that carried weight. Earth's genes weren't just random. The general had uncovered pre-contact experiments buried in forgotten satellites, evidence that one of the founding species, possibly the council's core member, had once manipulated early human evolution. Only they'd stopped, mid-way. Why they'd stopped, and covered it up was the real secret, because it worked. Humanity had gone quiet through the early centuries, appearing manageable, stunted even. But every time Earth faced extinction, natural or engineered, they pushed forward, recovered faster, adapted harder, learned deeper. No collapse ever stuck. And the king, whatever name he had taken across eons, had recognized that Earth's evolutionary momentum couldn't simply be suppressed by laws or locked trade routes. It had to be interrupted. And that's why the general had to be silenced. Because she had called up the gate. Now it was here. Inside the chamber, the air shifted. The tension didn't fade, but it changed. The fear, it wasn't disbelief anymore. It was knowing. Everyone in the room now understood what the general had chosen to do. She'd finished what the council tried to bury across the solar system. Human colonies since the Ascendancy Code. Ships stood down, not because the threat was gone, but because something older than threat had awakened. The ghost fleet that had vanished into deep systems began appearing again, not with weapons drawn, but sending back scans. Reports. The gate wasn't limited to Europa. Small echoes of its energy signature had started to pulse across ancient Terran structures, old deep bunkers, Earthgov labyrinths, ruined outposts from the silent wars. Humanity wasn't facing an enemy. It was facing a question. As Executor stepped forward onto the ice of Europa with the first team. Suits sealed and trackers active, he looked up at the arc, now framing the sky in dim soft blue pulses. It wasn't glowing from power cells. It was reading them measuring the gate didn't open to something. Behind it it awakened something that was already. Within then came the final. Peace. The general's avatar appeared through a restricted channel that still ran through neural key. Access on Martian frequency bands. She wasn't speaking live. This was her parting command. The king was right, she said. He knew we were getting close, knew we weren't supposed to finish this path, but he made a mistake. Her image flickered slightly. He thought by ending me, he bought time. What he didn't understand is, it was never about me. It was never about a leader or a treaty or a single command. It's about everyone waking up. The message ended there, but it left behind one more thing. A scan P. The translation program that followed read only 3 words, ***, humanity. Fully realized. ***, in the days that followed, the panic around the gate died down, but not because people stopped fearing it. Rather, because something shifted in the way humans interacted with it. Across colonies, psychic feedback loops that used to glitch from proximity to alien tech now sense cleanly. Neural echoes once only replicable and council-controlled. Augmentation started transmitting like natural waves between human networks. Even old Earthborn children began sensing fragments they couldn't explain. Emotions from across the planet. Thoughts not spoken aloud. A surge in connection. The gate had been designed centuries ago not to give humans their next tools, but to unlock the ones buried inside them already. The general had known that power wasn't stored in weapons or fleets. It was stored in memory. In humanity itself. FY. Became more than a military term. It became a history remembered right human first yield. Always endure. Always adapt. Not through conquest, but through sheer will to never become what they had fought against. Galactic King, isolated in his throne world, went silent. No further commands. No declarations. His last words would remain unanswered. I didn't kill her to start war. I killed her to delay your rebirth. In that way, he succeeded. But only for a moment. Now, humanity walked forward, not as the suppressed species pleading for representation, but as something more, something proven, something awake. The treaty that had lasted 2,000 years was broken. Yes, but on fire. Not in fleets burning across orbit. It was broken when a species remembered who they were meant to become. Walker left without a word one morning. Took the old dropship out past the asteroid belt and never transmitted again. Some said he was looking for the next gate. Others believed he had seen too much and simply returned to the shadows. Executor stayed. He wasn't a man who sought peace, but he carried the general's final words everywhere he went. We were meant to grow with or without permission. The council restructured months later. Some species withdrew. Others asked for Earth's guidance instead of fearing it. Slowly, the alliances reformed. But there was no going back to what it was. Earth had changed the balance. Not with war. With memory. And far beneath Europa's ice, the gate continued to pulse softly, no longer hidden. No longer sealed. It waited. As humanity, flawed, passionate, unbroken, stepped into the next unknown. Not asking. Not demanding. Just becoming.